Namaste, hello, and a very warm welcome to UPSC for everyone. My name is Abhinav, and in this video, we'll be discussing selected topics from the Hindu and Indian Express for the date 15th September. Now, in this video, we'll be discussing the following topics. China has massively deployed troops along the LAC, says Rajnath. So, our defense minister made a statement yesterday in the parliament about the situation along the LAC, and he appraised the nation as to what the developments are and how well we are prepared. So we'll just have a look at that. Then government refuses demands to restore MP LADS funds. So in this, we'll understand the concept of MP LAD funds. New powers for aviation regulators. So there's a new bill which seeks to give new powers to aviation regulators, basically in the field of air safety. It is in the backdrop that there are many chinks in the armor, as you may say, in regard to our air regulations. So this bill aims to curb that. Then new bill on powers of Delhi government, LG. Now again a very important news, because this is always in the news one way or the other. The government of NCT Delhi and the Union Home Ministry are always at loggerheads because the LG acts under Ministry of Home Affairs. Now the Ministry of Home Affairs is trying to bring a new bill which seeks to give more discretionary powers to the LG. So we'll see all about that. Then Venus in focus. In the last video, we also discussed about Venus and how the discovery of phosphine gas on Venus is an exciting prospect. So we'll dig somewhat deeper into this news. Then scheme for health sector extended. Now this is about the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, the health component. So we'll see what this scheme is all about. An economic disaster foretold. Now this editorial is opinionated, so we'll not get into the opinions of whatever they wanted to convey. What we'll take from this editorial is the concept of real GDP and also how they collect data from the unorganized sector to come at GDP figures. Then Parliament and its panels, again some opinion based. So we'll only see about the department related standing committees that we have in our country and their composition. So let's get started. China has massively deployed troops along LAC, says Rajnath. So before we see what the defense minister has to say, let us quickly look at the whole Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh map and understand the LAC, LOC and what all territories have been illegally occupied by both China and Pakistan. So this line here, this is the LOC, which is a temporary border between India and Pakistan, right? This is Gilgit-Baltistan, which has been occupied illegally by Pakistan since 1947. And see, this is the CPEC that is running through Gilgit-Baltistan. So India says that this project CPEC economic corridor, in which China has invested heavily, about 40 to 60 billion dollars that China has put into this project, and India says that this is illegal and it is part of the larger Belt and Road Initiative, and that is why we don't join the Belt and Road Initiative. Now this is the Shaksgam Valley, this area, and Pakistan has illegally ceded this area to China in 1963. Now this is Aksai Chin, and this line here, this is the LAC, right? This is Pangong Lake, 1/3 in India and 2/3 in China. Now see this road, this is the strategic highway that I always tell you about. This is basically joining the Xinjiang region to Tibet. Now China built this in 1957, and this is where the whole 1962 war saga started, right? So China doesn't want to lose this area at any point. Now other places that are in news, Siachen Glacier. Now Siachen Glacier and how India occupied the Siachen Glacier is a very interesting story, perhaps for some other video. Galwan Valley, which was in news, Hot Springs, and this is Pangong Lake. This is Kargil, this is Leh. So this is basically the broad contours of what is happening in the area and which area is illegally controlled by Pakistan and illegally controlled by China. Now let's see what the defense minister said. Now first, just see, this is the Pangong Tso Lake. It is an enlarged version of what we saw on the map. So these are finger points. I've told you about finger points as well. These are basically spurs of this mountain range which is called Chang Chen Mo, right? And why are these points called finger points? Because when you look at them from a satellite, they look like fingers. That is why they are called finger points. Now their importance is that in the Pangong Tso region, like I showed you, let me show you again. See, this is Pangong Tso. So 1/3 in India, 2/3 in China. And see, this is the LAC that is running. So the LAC in the Pangong Tso Lake is marked in terms of the finger points. And one more thing, this strategically important highway is numbered China National Highway 219. You should also keep that in mind. Now getting back to it. So these fingers basically they demarcate the LAC in the Pangong Tso Lake. Now India says that LAC is coterminous with finger 8 and we physically controlled till finger 4 and we used to patrol till finger 8. Now this region between finger 4 to finger 8 is called gray area. Now what has happened that the Chinese are now sitting here and they are preventing us from patrolling up till the finger 8 area, right? Now let's see. The defense minister said that China has mobilized a large number of troops and armaments along the line of actual control as well as in depth area. Depth area means the strategically important areas like Galwan Valley, Hot Springs and the northern bank of the Pangong Tso. The defense minister pointed out that there were several friction areas in eastern Ladakh including Gorga, Konkala and north and south banks of Pangong Tso Lake. Before the Moscow Pact, that was basically discussed between the special representatives of the two countries, our special representative being RNSA Mr. Ajit Doval. So we agreed at 5 points and this came to be known as Moscow Pact. It was discussed on the sidelines of the SCO that is happening in Russia. So before the Moscow Pact, Indian and Chinese troops fired 100 to 200 rounds on Pangong North Bank. But they basically were not shooting at each other, they are shooting in the air. There have been reports of almost 3 incidents of firing since the past 17 days. Now what has been India's response? We already know that India has occupied some strategically important heights at the southern bank of the Pangong Lake like Black Top and all that. In response, our armed forces have made appropriate counter deployments in these areas to ensure that India's security interests are fully protected. Even in yesterday's video, we discussed about the LAC. So some good points there as well. We made it clear to the Chinese side, both through diplomatic and military channels, that China was by such action attempting to unilaterally alter the status quo. It was categorically conveyed that this was unacceptable and India has taken many steps. For example, we have banned Chinese apps. We are also controlling the foreign investment that is coming from China. Now, Mr. Rajnath also said that this time around, the nature of standoffs is completely different. The minister said that the nature of the current standoff with China was different, both in terms of scale of troops, because massive deployments are taking place, even as if we speak, involved, and the number of friction points. Mr. Singh said the amassing of troops by China went against 1993 and 1996 agreements. So I think day before yesterday, in that video, we discussed that article by Lieutenant General D.S. Huda, which gave a brief about the agreements that have been signed. And as per 1993 agreement, we have mutually decided to limit the number of troops and limit the deployment of arms and machinery over there. So China is basically violating all those terms, but no surprises because you can never trust the Chinese. Government refuses demands to restore MP Lads funds. So in this news, we'll first get to know what are MP Lads funds. Why are they important to MPs? Now basically let me give you a brief. MP-led funds are basically members of parliament local area development funds. So what happens that each MP gets rupees 5 crore per annum for some development works in his or her constituency. Now the beauty of this scheme is that the MP only gets to recommend. He does not get the money. The money is directly transferred to the local body or the implementing agency that is actually working on the project. But the MP only basically recommends some types of works. Now MPs say that this fund was important because they actually get to do some work at the grassroots levels. This fund enables them to do so. But because of the COVID-19 and the bad shape of economy, we have put a freeze on this scheme for the next 2 financial years till 2022. So under the MP-led scheme, MPs can recommend development programs involving spending of rupees 5 crore each year in respective constituencies. MPs from both Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, including nominated ones. So please pay attention, even the nominated ones get the access to this fund. MPs and MLAs, because there is MLA-led for state legislative assemblies, do not receive any money under these schemes. The government transfers it directly to the respective local authority. So there is less chance of delays and also less chance of leakages in the fund transfer. The legislators can only recommend works in the constituencies based on a set of guidelines that focus on creation of durable community assets. So important point again is durable community assets like roads, school buildings, etc. MP-LAD's fund, which the centre froze for 2 financial years till 2022 as an austerity measure. Opposition MPs raised issue amid debate on salary cuts bill. And simultaneously, the Lok Sabha passed the Salary Allowances and Pension of Members of Parliament Amendment Bill 2020, which seeks to cut salaries of MPs by 30%. So again, this is an austerity measure. New powers for aviation regulators. So this new bill, Aircraft Amendment Bill 2020, seeks to basically plug the loopholes into the civil aviation regulatory sector, especially in terms of civil aviation safety. And this is in the backdrop of the recent tragedy when there was the unfortunate incident in Kerala. So let's see what is this all about. The Aircraft Amendment Bill 2020 has been passed by the Parliament. The bill gives statutory powers to the Director General of Civil Aviation or the DGCA, the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security and the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. The amendments also address several regulatory shortcomings that were highlighted by aviation watchdogs of the United Nations and US. So which is the aviation watchdog of UN? It is the International Civil Aviation Organization or the ICAO. And for the US, it is the Federal Aviation Authority, FAA. So these two are basically the benchmarks when it comes to air regulation. So they both did a safety audit on the Indian aviation sector and they said that these are the lacunae in the regulatory field. So we are trying to plug those gaps. During their audits on safety and security in Indian aviation ecosystem, the changes include recognizing regulatory bodies such as the Bureau of Civil Aviation Security and the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. Though these organizations had been set up earlier, but they did not have the teeth. Now they have been given more power, which was set up through various government notifications but did not have defined roles under the Parent Act as well as the Air Navigation Services. So now let us hope with the passing of this bill, we would have a better regulatory framework in our country in terms of safety and security in the field of civil aviation. New bill on powers of Delhi government and LG. Now Delhi is a UT with a legislature under Article 239AA and 239AB. These are the two important articles with regard to Delhi. So under 239AA, Delhi is a UT with a legislature, right? It has 70 members and the government is known as the government of NCT or the National Capital Territory of Delhi. Okay. Now the question is, why is Delhi a union territory? because Delhi is the capital of India. I hope you all know that. Now, why not make it a full state? Because of some inherent administrative compulsions. For example, the government of NCT Delhi has all the things under the state list under their legislative powers except for police, land and public order. Now these three things are important because Delhi being a capital, it's host to a lot of embassies. It is also host to the Parliament of India, right? Now imagine a situation if there's a movement, VIP movement of the Prime Minister or any other dignitary, foreign dignitary who's in India. Then, for example, if police were under the Delhi government, then they'd have to discuss everything with the Delhi government. Now sometimes that might be compromised because more the levels, more you talk, more there is chance of compromises in the security architecture. So this is just one of the reasons why Delhi is not a state but a UT. So I'm sure this issue will get big in future. So we'll discuss this in detail in some other video. Till now you should just know that Delhi is a special UT. Relevant articles are 239A, A and 239A, B. One more thing, Delhi is the only UT with a separate high court of its own, and Delhi is the only UT where there is a provision of president's rule. Okay, under article 239A, B. Now let's see what this new bill is all about. One more thing, so the UTs have representatives from center. In the UTs without a legislature, they are known as administrators, and in UTs with a legislature like Delhi and Puducherry, they are known as lieutenant governors. Now, how many UTs are there in India? 8 UTs. Okay. Newly created UTs were J&K and Ladakh. We all know that. Now, J&K is going to be a UT with a legislature. There's going to be a delimitation exercise in J&K, and after that there will be election and there would be a J&K government but as a UT. One more thing, from January 26, 2020, the UTs of Daman and Diu and Dadra and Nagar Haveri were also merged into one. So the total number of UTs in India right now are 8, 28 states and 8 UTs. Now let us see what this article is saying. The National Capital Territory of Delhi Amendment Bill 2020. The Ministry of Home Affairs is likely to introduce a legislation in the ongoing Parliament session to amend a 1991 Act pertaining to the powers and functions of the Delhi government and the Lieutenant Governor. And it is the Ministry of Home Affairs that is the nodal ministry when it comes to dealing with union territories. So that is why Ministry of Home Affairs is going to bring this bill. Now the bill proposes to clearly spell out the functions of the Council of Ministers and the Lieutenant Governor by giving more discretionary powers to the Lieutenant Governor. Now Lieutenant Governor is the direct representative of the centre and he reports to the Ministry of Home Affairs, in effect to the PMO or the Prime Minister. So they are going to give him more powers. Basically there was a great power tussle between the government of NCT Delhi and the LG. Then there was a Supreme Court case and there was a 5-judge bench judgment which we'll just see. Again there's a matter of services that is still in the courts. So now government is bringing this bill and it will take care of all of that. So the proposed changes, the LG could act in his discretion on any matter that is beyond the purview of powers of Assembly of Delhi in matters related to all India services like the IAS, IPS, what most of you I am hoping are aspiring to be, and the anti-corruption branch. This anti-corruption branch was also in news because there was a tussle between different officers of the same anti-corruption branch. One was being promoted by the Delhi government, other by the Lieutenant Governor. So that is why these changes are being implemented. Now the background. The Union Territory of Delhi with a Legislative Assembly came into being in 1991 under Article 239AA inserted by the Constitutional 69th Amendment Act 1991. So again 239AA, 239AB and 69th Constitutional Amendment Act. It said that the UT of Delhi shall be called the National Capital Territory of Delhi and the administrator thereof appointed under Article 239 shall be designated as the Lieutenant Governor. The Legislative Assembly of Delhi has the power to make laws in all matters except public order, police and land. So these three are important. Fight in courts. In 2018, a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court unanimously held that the Lieutenant Governor was bound by the aid and advice of the Delhi government and both had to work harmoniously with each other. The apex court is still examining the services matter. So basically services matter is about the All India Services and also the Anti-Corruption Bureau. So they are going to take care of that with this new bill. Indian economy to shrink 9% in financial year 21, says Asian Development Bank. Just a quick news. It says the growth outlook remains highly vulnerable to either a prolonged outbreak of the pandemic or a resurgence of cases. So, and India is seeing sort of a resurgence only. Now this is maybe probably because more testing is being done, and there's also definitely the fact that people are becoming more and more complacent. So please wear your mask, avoid risky places, avoid crowded places, stay safe. So ADB forecasts a strong recovery for the economy in financial year 21 with the gross domestic product growing by 8% as mobility and business activities resume more widely. But all of this will happen only when we are able to control the corona pandemic, and we should also think in terms that what if we don't get a vaccine in time, and what if the vaccine is not that efficacious. So we should try and evolve other methods, and for that it is very, very important that we take precautions right now, because it is not only us, it is hurting the entire economy as well. So please take care. Scheme for health workers extended. So there's this Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Package Insurance Scheme, which was basically launched for health workers fighting the COVID-19. It has now been extended for another 180 days. So the scheme was announced on March 30 for 90 days, then extended for 90 days, and now for 180 days. So please take a screenshot. These are the features of the scheme. So let's just quickly go through them. Insurance cover of 50 lakh for 90 days, which has been now extended 90, 90 and 180. So that means total of 360 days from its inception. So insurance cover of 50 lakh rupees to 22.12 lakh public healthcare providers and community health workers. Insurance scheme will also include accidental loss of life on account of contracting COVID-19. Insurance provided under the scheme would be over and above any other insurance cover being availed by the beneficiary. So you will get your regular insurance as well, plus this insurance under the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana. On account of unprecedented situation, private hospital staff, retired volunteer, local urban bodies, contract, daily wage, ad hoc, outsourced staff requisitioned by hospitals can also be drafted for COVID-19 related responsibility. So that is why this scheme has been extended to them as well. Now, an economic disaster foretold. From this article, we'll only take the concept of what is a real GDP and how the GDP figures are estimated for the unorganized sector. Otherwise, they've just given their own opinion, which we are not genuinely interested in. So let's see what the article says. Now, first of all, what is GDP? I've been telling you time and again, the simplest definition of GDP is the sum total of market value of all the goods and services which are basically produced within an economy in a given year. So here the concept of territory is important, that within a specific territory that production should take in a given year. So it doesn't matter who is undertaking the production activity, all that matters is the value of goods and services. Now, real GDP is a concept that basically removes the effect of inflation. So, for example, you could have a GDP of 100 crore or 1000 crore, but if you remove inflation, then the actual GDP might be 900 crore. So that difference is of about 100 crore, that is due to inflation. So real GDP basically removes the effect of inflation that we see on the GDP figures. So that is why it is called real GDP, and it has a base year. For example, for India, we have 2011-12 base year. There's a concept called GDP deflator, which is the ratio of GDP at current prices or the market prices or the GDP at the base price. So GDP deflator is an indicator of how good the economy is doing, removing the effect of your inflation. Lower the GDP deflator, that means more is the concurrence between the real and the nominal GDP. Now let's just see. So according to the data released by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation of the Government of India, that is the MOSPI, real quarterly GDP contracted by a whopping 23.9% between April-June 2019 and April-June 2020. So this is a true fact. That is why we are covering it here. Now what is real GDP first? Real GDP measures an economy's total goods and services in a given year, taking into account changes in price level, that is inflation. It allows you to compare GDP by year because it takes into account inflation. It's a good indicator of where the economy is in its business cycle. See, business cycle is like that there's always going to be a boom phase, then stagnation, then bust, then stagnation probably, then boom, stagnation, bust. That is how the business cycle goes. So it gives a good indicator. For example, a very high deflator would basically indicate that there's a very high inflation. We don't want very high inflation. There should be inflation, but it should be in a comfortable territory. For example, in our country, we have around 2 to 6% that comfortable territory for inflation. Beyond that, it's a problem. So we'll discuss the whole inflation issue when we talk about economics. Knowing real GDP trends can help you prepare for recession or make good financial decisions. This magnitude of real GDP decline is unprecedented since the country started publishing quarterly GDP estimates in 1996. This is also true. That is why we have put it here. So it's a simple illustration of what a real GDP is. Now, real GDP shows only the actual growth. Nominal GDP shows the growth plus the inflation effect, that is the growth in prices. So real GDP is nominal GDP divided by deflator, or you can also say that deflator is equal to nominal GDP upon real GDP. Nominal GDP is what? The GDP at the current market prices, and real GDP is the GDP adjusted to the base year, and the base year for deflator is 2011-12. According to Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, India's real GDP contraction between April-June 2019 and April-June 2020 has been the largest among 13 large economies of the world. Now, the unorganized sector forms a significant part of the Indian economy. According to some estimates, it accounts for 45% of output and 93% of employment of the working population. So this is very, very important sector of the economy. While data collection methods have undoubtedly improved over time, coming up with a reliable estimates of value added in the unorganized sector is challenging because we really don't know who is getting what. So government has devised its own method. Now what is that? Typically the government statisticians combine information about value added per worker from enterprise surveys with information about employment from employment-unemployment surveys to generate estimates of output in the unorganized sector. So basically what happens that they conduct these surveys, and with these surveys they also get to know what kind of salary these people are getting on an average in the unorganized sector. So from that and the value of the output that a particular sector within the organized sector is producing, so they come up with the value added per worker figure, and that figure is extrapolated to get an idea of the contribution of the unorganized sector to the GDP of the country. So this was the only important part from this editorial. Rest is entirely conjectural or their own opinion, which we are not genuinely interested in. Parliament and its panels. Now this article is by an ex-Secretary General of the Rajya Sabha. Now basically the Vice President of India and the Chairman of Rajya Sabha, Mr. Venkaiah Naidu, has proposed to raise the term of these panels to 2 years. They basically have a fixed tenure of 1 year. So it is in news that he probably might increase them to 2 years. Now, before we begin, first, the Vice President of India is the ex officio chairman of Rajya Sabha. That means by virtue of his office, he is the chairman of Rajya Sabha. So if anybody asks you who is the chairman of Rajya Sabha, it is the Vice President, and that is the constitutional position of the Vice President. He is to only officiate the office of the President when the President cannot do so because of vacancy, and if the President unfortunately dies or resigns or is impeached, then the Vice President holds the office until a new President is elected. The Vice President is not supposed to replace the President. For example, in America, the President has a running mate who becomes the Vice President. So if that President is dead, impeached, or he has to resign, then the Vice President takes over. That is not the case in India. Now, the second part is understanding the departmentally related standing committees. So in 1993, 17 departmentally related standing committees were formed, and this system was increased to 24 in July 2004. Now basically each committee has 31 members, 21 come from Lok Sabha and 10 come from Rajya Sabha. And the members are nominated by the respective chairman of the houses. For example, for Lok Sabha, the members would be nominated by the Speaker of Lok Sabha, and for Rajya Sabha, the members would be nominated by the chairman. So this you should also know that the presiding officer of the Lok Sabha is called the Speaker, and the presiding officer of Rajya Sabha is called the chairman. Now, why these panels were formed or the committees were formed? They are basically there to simplify the work of the parliament. See, parliament meets for 3 sessions in a year. Usually 3 sessions. There can be more sessions. One more thing, it is the President of India that calls the session. Minimum sessions are 2, maximum can be as many. Why minimum sessions 2? Because the constitution says that the recess between 2 consecutive sessions can be maximum 6 months. So basically minimum 2 sessions in a year and maximum as many as possible. The government through the President calls these sessions. Okay. Now these committees were formed because parliament meets for 3 sessions in a year, and we all know how much time of parliament is wasted in debates and adjournments and walkouts and whatnot. So it is practically not possible for parliament to fully take up each piece of legislation for detailed discussion. So when we'll discuss polity later on, I will tell you how a bill becomes an act. So one of the things is that first the bill is presented to the parliament, either house, Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. Then after its introduction, it is sent to the department related standing committees. Now these standing committees, they scrutinize the bill. They go through the nitty-gritty of the bill and they produce their own report on the bill, that what are its weakness and what are its strengths, and then a detailed discussion takes place in the parliament on those reports. So these committees are very, very important. Now let's see. After experiencing the working of department related standing committee for a decade, the system was restructured in July 2004, wherein the number of committees was increased from 17 to 24. Now the 24 committees have a membership of 31, 10 from Rajya Sabha and 21 from Lok Sabha, and they are nominated by the respective presiding officers of both houses. They can accommodate 240 members of Rajya Sabha, right? 24 into 10, and 504 members of Lok Sabha. Now important part is the ministers cannot be members of these committees, because these committees basically they go through the bills presented by the ministers only or the ministries. So if a minister is present in any committee, then he can unduly influence the committee. That is why ministers are not made members of these committees. Now the department related parliamentary standing committees have a so-called tenure of 1 year, and that is why it is in news, because Mr. Venkaiah Naidu probably wants to increase it to 2 years. Now according to sub rule 4 of rule 331D of Lok Sabha rules and sub rule 3 of rule 269 of Rajya Sabha rules, the term of office of the members of the committees shall not exceed 1 year. So each committee has 31 members and their term in the committee shall not exceed 1 year. Thus it is the term of the office of the members and not the committees per se that is 1 year. So these committees are permanent, because first in 1993, then 2004, and they are continuing. Only the members change per year. The committees are more or less permanent till the time Parliament does not change them. This tenurial issue has to be looked at against the backdrop of the fact that the Rajya Sabha itself undergoes partial biannual renewal, since 1/3 of its members retire every 2 years by virtue of clause 1 of Article 83 of the Constitution. So basically Article 80 defines the Parliament as a 3-member body: the President, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Now Article 83 says that 1/3 of members of Rajya Sabha retire every 2 years, and the tenure of each member or the term of each member is 6 years. So Rajya Sabha members retire in 6 years, and 1/3 of the Rajya Sabha retires every 2 years. As far as Lok Sabha is concerned, it has a fixed tenure of 5 years unless sooner dissolved. Since there is a mismatch between the election schedule of Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha, it is only once in 10 years that the requirement of a major reshuffle of the standing committees in both houses is expected to coincide. That is after the second round of Lok Sabha and the fifth biennial round of the Rajya Sabha. So this is the situation that is arising. That is why this is in news. But just keep in mind that the committees per se are permanent for all practical purposes. It is only that members, they retire every 1 year. So every year the membership is renewed by the presiding officers of both houses. 24 committees in all, 31 members, 10 from Rajya Sabha, 21 from Lok Sabha, nominated by the presiding officers of each house. Venus in focus. So yesterday as well we discussed about Venus and how the finding of phosphine gas is exciting, because phosphine gas on Earth is only associated with the decaying of organic matter. So that finding on Venus is somewhat of an indicator that probably there was life in some form on Venus. We really aren't sure, because right now nobody is saying that there is life on Venus. So let us get to know something more about Venus. I told you yesterday that Venus is sometimes called the Earth's twin. It is the second planet from the Sun. It is also the hottest planet in the solar system, and it is also a rocky planet like Earth. It is similar in shape, size and composition to the Earth, and that is why it's called Earth's twin. So Venus, the hottest planet in solar system, surface temperatures of above 460 degrees Celsius. It is similar in size to Earth, and it is also rocky. That is why it is sometimes called Earth's twin. Now another interesting fact, that in 2011, the European Space Agency's mission Venus Express. So sometimes in the past UPSC has also asked about these space missions. So this Venus Express was of European Space Agency 2011, and it was also for Venus. The name itself is self-explanatory. It found signs of ozone made of 3 oxygen atoms and considered a biomarker in the upper atmosphere of Venus. So there is ozone in our atmosphere as well. Especially it has a very important role in protecting us from the UV radiation, and ozone is also a biomarker like phosphine gas. So now this confirmation of 2 biomarkers, one ozone and other is phosphine. The recent discovery of traces of phosphine, another biomarker, in its atmosphere has just given the search for extraterrestrial life a shot in the arm. Phosphine, a compound of 1 phosphorus atom and 3 hydrogen atoms, is given out by some microbes during biochemical processes. In an atmosphere rich in carbon dioxide, it is likely to get destroyed soon. But it is not getting destroyed. As a matter of fact, its concentrations are higher. So that means there is substantial amount of phosphine present in Venus. The researchers estimate that phosphine forms about 20 parts per billion of Venus's atmosphere. This, in fact, when added to the hostile conditions on its surface, like we saw, surface temperatures can exceed 460 degrees Celsius, and the atmosphere, I told you yesterday as well, it is acidic in nature, yields tantalizing possibilities of phosphine survival through extraordinary chemistry and thermodynamics, or the stubborn triumph of biology and life. Remember yesterday I also told you that life as we know it, we use the word life as we know it because we have a limited definition of life. Probably there are other forms of life which we are not aware of. For example, a life which could exist or survive in such hostile conditions. This can now only be taken further by making in situ measurements. That means we have to send a probe into Venus. In the atmosphere of Venus, this poses its own challenges. And what are the challenges? High surface temperatures and the acidic nature of the atmosphere of Venus. Apart from high surface temperature and dense atmosphere, now what would dense atmosphere do? Remember, we discussed this in the HS-DTV, the high speed demonstration technology vehicle, that such vehicles have heat shields to prevent them from getting burned due to friction of the atmosphere. So the same principle applies here as well. So apart from high surface temperature and dense atmosphere, the presence of sulfuric acid in the atmosphere of Venus makes it a highly corrosive environment. While NASA's mission is slated for launch next year, ISRO is looking at 2023 right now. So again, this news is also important because India is also planning to send its probe to Venus. So you should know these things. What 2011 Venus Express, it found biomarker ozone. Now biomarker phosphine has been found, and it might change our definition of life as we know it. So that is all for this video, folks. I hope this was helpful. Please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you get notifications whenever we post a new video. Also, if you like our work, please press the like button. And please do connect with us on our Instagram page, UPSC for Everyone. See you next time. Till then, stay happy, stay safe, and have a great day. Namaste and Jai Hind.